Well, we started with a Dream Big panel, and we kept adding and adding and adding until what we ended up with was a Dream Big 9-patch. This is just about the largest quilt that I can hang in the studio. It's 8 feet square or 96 inches square, and this is plenty big enough for a queen size bed, which was part of the reason why I wanted to make it. You can see it's pretty basic construction. We have one panel here in the center that's whole, and then we have one panel on each side that's been divided vertically, and we have one panel on the top and bottom that's been divided horizontally, and then we have the 4 corners which have been divided both horizontally and vertically. So basically it's fairly easy construction. I used sashing on this sample. The pattern that we have will show you without sashing. It's an easy addition, and I also added a border because I wanted to get to a specific size. So I'm going to bring the camera in and show you my little mock-up of how we got started on this Dream Big quilt. Before we get too far along, I wanted to mention that we do have a free pattern download for this quilt on the website at urbanalements.com. The quilt is called Dream Big 9-patch. It just has 3 pages that will print out if you wanted to print that, and you could make some little notations as you watch the video for the process. So again, I'll put a link on our video description so you can get to the pattern, the free download, and it's just easy to follow pattern for you to use when making the quilt. The impetus for making this quilt was really twofold. One thing was that as much as I love the Dream Big panel, I didn't need another wall hanging in my house. I've got plenty of wall hangings. But what I did want was a quilt that I could utilize on the bed. So that was one thought that was in my head. The second thing is that going to Quilt Market and Quilt Festival year after year, I kept finding Dream Big panels, and I found that I kept purchasing the same color over and over again and tucking it into my stash, not realizing that I had already purchased it. So when I was cleaning the studio and found multiple Dream Big panels, I thought, what could I do with these that would be a little more useful to me and then a wall hanging? And so that's when we came up with the Dream Big 9-patch. One thing that's kind of fun to do is to go online and save some copies of some different colorations of the panel on your computer. Then I printed these out, but I made sure to deselect the fit to size. I did not want these to fit to size because it distorts the shape. I wanted them to print out square. So I printed out what would be the center panel, 1 copy, and then 3 copies of what would be the surrounding. In the version behind me, I used the scarlet, which red and green Christmas is like my ultimate favorite. A lot of my house is colored that way. So basically this was the original version, and there was another version that I just did a mock-up on. I forget what this was. I think this was light rose and fuchsia. But what we're going to be working with today is actually going to be the opal and tide pool. And basically you can see that it's a very simple process. But I'm going to move the camera in even a little bit closer just so you can see me shuffling my papers around. I have my center panel all ironed, got all of the creases out of it. I've also trimmed off the selvage on all 4 sides, so the center panel is done now, and I can just set it aside until I'm ready to sew. This is going to be the top and bottom of the quilt in the center, and so I've given this a nice crease on the fold line, so when I open this up I can just lay my rotary cutter ruler right on this line and slash this across, and then I'll have my center top and my center bottom. If you don't have a lot of room to lay these out, you may want to take a post-it note and just put on it center top, center bottom, just so you keep these from getting mixed up, because if they were turned, what is that, 90 degrees or 45 degrees? I don't remember which. If you turned it, they would look like the center right and center left instead of center top and bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and mark mine after I get them cut, just so I keep them organized. At this point, I have all of my panels cut up in the way that I need them to. I have my center panel as a solid piece. I just trimmed off the selvage. I trimmed off the selvage of the two center side panels, and I split it down the middle. I cut off the selvage of the center top and bottom and split it, and then I had the four corners, cut off the selvage, and I have those laid out. Because the panels are so large, I don't have room enough to show you how I would piece this together except on this paper, which should do the trick anyway. What I'm going to do is take my three top components, the right, center, and left, and I'm going to join those together on the sewing machine. When I get those sewn together, I'm going to sew this or iron the seams towards the center. When I get my three center panels ready, I'm going to join those two pieces to the center down the long seam, and then I'm going to iron those seams away from the center. And then I'm going to take the three bottom components and join those together with two seams and iron those towards the center. So when I go ahead and join these two seams together, the seams are opposing and they'll nest together beautifully for your piecing. So as you can see, there's very few seams on this. You have two here, and two here. That's 6 seams, and then 2 more. That's 8 seams to get the whole quilt put together. Now they are long seams, and I would recommend pinning these large components, especially because Hoffman has printed so many millions of these panels. They're not all going to be exactly the same size, so pinning I think would be a really good idea, just to make sure that they line up beautifully. Anything that we need to trim off after we're finished, we can trim up the edges. So we're really worried about meeting the center out. Now if you wanted to, when you were finished getting the whole component quilt put together, you could put on a border of your choosing. But right now I'm just going to go ahead and get my seams sewn and get this quilt put together, so we can do one last shot with it pinned onto my quilt, and then we can talk about the quilting process. Part of the problem with filming this particular quilt is that the components are so large. So again, I'm going to show you on the little mock-up what I've done so far. I have taken the two top corner units and I've sewn those two seams together to create one 3-piece unit for the top. I've done the same thing for the two side panels for the side center, and I've done the same thing for the bottom. So I have now 3 large components. And again, one of the nice things about keeping these all in the same configuration as you cut them, when you sew these seams together, these are all straight of grain seams. When I sew these together, these will all be cross grain seams. So the amount of stretch or give that any of these components would have would be the same. So we won't really have a huge issue with puckering. I've ironed the seams for these out. No, I think I ironed these seams in, these out, and these in. So when I do this last seam, then what I will have is nesting seams where these join here at the two corners. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next, and when I come back, these 3 pieces should be a quilt. I just have 3 seams, no, just 2 seams, 2 seams left. And when I come back, this should all be, ta-da! There we have it. The Dream Big 9-patch with opal center and tide pool surround. Now all we have to do is get it quilted. Now as you can see, this one's a little bit smaller because we did not put sashing on this version, but you certainly could at home. Also, we did not put a border on this one yet anyway, so a border would definitely add some additional size. Because the component blocks of the 9-patch are so large, you can really get away with adding a pretty fair size border on this. 8 or 9 inches wouldn't be crazy if you needed to stretch it out that big. Now there are several options for quilting on this. There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't use any one of the over 5,000 panto designs and do an edge-to-edge design on this with some beautiful feathers or swirls, whatever you wanted. Also, you could use the Dream Big tearaway panels, and in the same way that we dissected the Dream Big panel blocks, you could dissect the tearaway blocks and just fuse them in place with the 505 temporary spray adhesive and do the components on there. Alternately, you could also do ruler work or free motion quilting if you chose to do that. So you have a lot of options for the quilting. It does make a fairly large quilt when you're finished, so you certainly can utilize this on the bed. And I apologize for the wrinkles, but every time I put it on the ironing board and ironed it, when I ironed the next section, it just got wrinkled again. So this is about as good as I could get it without a hands-free steamer to use. But this is our Dream Big 9-patch pattern. Again, this is available on our website. It's a free pattern download, and we also have the Dream Big fabric panels available, as well as the Dream Big tearaway quilting patterns. I hope you've enjoyed all of these videos this year, and we look forward to making new videos for you in the upcoming year.